When Timothée Chalamet faced an unexpected mishap on SNL, his reaction left the audience stunned and emotional. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The audience roared as Timothée stepped onto the legendary Saturday Night Live stage, the bright lights reflecting off his nervous but confident smile. The cheers were deafening, but something in his gut twisted, an eerie feeling, like he was walking into a trap. The cue cards were in place, the teleprompter was rolling. He had rehearsed everything, yet the moment he glanced at the first card in his hand, his heart stopped. It wasn't the joke he had approved. His stomach tightened as he scanned the words again, disbelief flashing across his face. The joke was brutal, cutting deep into a powerful politician's family, specifically his daughter. It wasn't satire. It wasn't comedy. It was a hit job. Timothée's grip on the card tightened. His pulse pounded in his ears. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted him to say it. Someone powerful enough to change the script at the last second, knowing he wouldn't have time to back out. The live audience was waiting. Millions were watching at home. The air was thick with expectation. A single thought crashed into his mind like a train wreck. If I say this, my career is over. If I don't, they'll make me pay another way. Behind the cameras, the director gave a sharp nod, signaling him to continue. The stage manager's eyes were locked onto him, unblinking. The teleprompter urged him forward, but Timothée stood frozen. And then, he noticed something. One of the writers standing just off stage, smirking. A knowing, satisfied grin as if he was watching a carefully planned execution. Timothée's blood ran cold. Something bigger was at play, and he was the target. Timothée's fingers curled around the cue card, his pulse hammering in his throat. He could feel the weight of the cameras, the millions of eyes locked on him, expecting him to deliver the punchline. But this wasn't comedy, this was a setup. A career-ending, reputation-shattering move disguised as a joke. The smirking writer off stage wasn't just enjoying the moment, he was daring Timothée to say it. The prompter blinked. His silence was stretching too long. The laughter in the audience had faded into an eerie hush. The stage manager took a step forward. Someone coughed. A bead of sweat slid down the back of Timothée's neck. His throat was dry. His mind raced. If he refused, would they cut his mic? Would they turn him into the villain? The headline would be brutal. Timothée Chalamet, bombs on SNL, walks off in embarrassing silence. But if he said it, he couldn't take it back. He'd be the face of a scandal so massive he might never recover. And then, movement. A producer in the control booth made a subtle hand signal. The camera angle shifted slightly, framing Timothée in a tighter shot. They were expecting a reaction. They wanted a moment. It hit him like a punch to the gut. This was never about the joke. It was about control, about testing how far they could push him, about seeing if he would break on live television, if he would become the puppet they could manipulate. His grip on the card tightened, a slow breath, a decision. Timothée ripped the cue card in half. The audience gasped. The smirking writer's face twisted in shock. A flicker of confusion passed over the director's face before he turned to the control room, barking orders. The prompter kept rolling, but Timothée wasn't looking at it anymore. He took a step closer to the microphone, his voice calm, but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "I was given a joke to say just now," he said, locking eyes with the camera. "But I'm not here to be someone's pawn." A murmur spread through the audience. Backstage, chaos erupted. The showrunners scrambled. The writer who had been smirking moments ago was now whispering furiously to a producer. One of the assistant directors motioned to security, and then, a sudden shift. The live audience, confused at first, started clapping, then cheering. The sound swelled, turning into a roar. Timothée stood there, his heart pounding, his body thrumming with adrenaline. He had just broken script on national television. And now he had no idea what was about to happen next. The cheers were growing louder, but Timothée knew better than to feel safe. He wasn't out of the woods yet. The stage manager had gone pale. The show's producers were scrambling, whispering into their headsets. Something was happening behind the scenes, something bigger than just a broken script. And then, movement. Two men in black suits stepped forward from the side of the stage. They weren't part of the usual security team. Timothée's pulse spiked. This wasn't just a corporate cleanup. This was something else. One of them spoke into a hidden earpiece. The other kept his eyes locked on Timothée like a hunter tracking prey. And just like that, he knew. They weren't going to let him walk out of this on his own terms. The audience was still cheering, unaware of the growing tension. Timothée's mind raced. The cameras were still rolling. Millions were watching. He needed to take control of the moment before they did. His eyes flickered toward the teleprompter. The script was still running. He was supposed to be moving on to the next segment, the safe, corporate-friendly, carefully controlled segment. Instead, he took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I want you all to see something," he said, turning to the audience. His voice was steady, but inside his heart was a storm. He reached down and picked up the torn cue card. The cameras zoomed in, the jagged edges visible, the words still readable. The audience gasped as they saw the offensive joke written in bold black ink. A joke that was never meant to be funny. A joke meant to ruin him. The weight of the moment crashed down. The audience wasn't laughing anymore. They were staring, processing. Some people were shaking their heads, others were whispering. The shift was happening in real time. The men in black suits were moving now, fast. Timothée felt it before he saw it, the energy shift. They were coming to cut the feed. But before they could reach him, he tore the mic off his lapel and spoke directly into the main boom mic. "I don't know who wanted me to say this," he said, voice sharp as a blade. "But I know why. They wanted a headline. They wanted a scandal. They wanted control." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. "And I'm telling you, I won't be their puppet." The second the words left his mouth, the screen went black. The broadcast was cut. Millions of people watching at home saw nothing but a sudden, eerie silence. Inside the studio, chaos erupted. Security reached for Timothée, but the audience was on their feet now, roaring in support. And in that moment he knew they had underestimated him. They thought they could control him, but they just made him unstoppable. The studio was in chaos. The second the screen cut to black, people started shouting, producers barking orders, crew members scrambling, security moving fast, but none of it mattered. The audience was on their feet. Timothée stood his ground as the two men in black suits approached. He could feel the tension in the air, the silent warning in their movements. They weren't just here to remove him. They were here to make an example out of him. But they had made one mistake. They had underestimated the audience. The chants started small, a few scattered voices growing louder, building into a roar. "Let him speak! Let him speak!" Security hesitated. The men in suits exchanged glances. This wasn't going according to plan. Timothée took a step forward, lifting the torn cue card for everyone to see one last time. "I want every single person here to remember this moment," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "They told me to say something that wasn't mine. They wanted me to be part of their game." He shook his head. "I don't play by their rules." The audience exploded. Cheers, whistles, fists in the air. People were recording, capturing every second. But then a new twist. From the side of the stage, a familiar voice spoke. "Cut his mic. Now." Timothée turned sharply. It was the SNL head producer, a woman known for her influence, her connections, and her iron grip over the show. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't scrambling. She was furious. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career," she said, stepping closer, her voice low enough that only he could hear. Timothée didn't flinch. He just smiled. "Did I?" She exhaled sharply, then turned to the control room. "Cut the house lights." The stage plunged into darkness. For a few eerie seconds, the only sounds were the shuffling of security, the confused murmurs of the audience, and the glowing screens of countless phones still recording. Then, boom. The emergency lights flickered on, casting the room in an ominous red glow. And in that moment, Timothée realized something. They weren't trying to just kick him out. They were trying to erase this entire moment. The cameras were dead. The live stream had been cut. They wanted to make it seem like this never happened. But they had already lost. Because the audience had seen everything. The phones were rolling. The internet was already on fire. Within seconds, hashtags were trending. Timothée vs SNL. Free speech on SNL. Who controls the narrative? This wasn't just a career moment anymore. This was a movement. And Timothée? He was now at the center of something much, much bigger than he had ever imagined. Timothée stood in the eerie red glow of the emergency lights, his breath steady despite the chaos. The studio execs had lost control, and they knew it. The audience wasn't leaving. The crowd's energy was electric, phones still up, still recording. Security hesitated, unsure of their next move. The world was watching, even if the official broadcast had been cut. And then, the first tweet went viral. A single clip, posted by someone in the audience. Timothée ripping the cue card. His voice raw and defiant. "I won't be their puppet." The internet erupted. Within seconds, every major platform was flooded. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. Millions were already seeing what SNL tried to bury. The head producer clenched her jaw, watching the numbers explode on a staff member's phone. She knew she had just lost. "Get him out," she snapped to security. But it was too late. The audience wasn't letting it happen. They surged forward, blocking the security team from reaching Timothée. A sea of voices, fists in the air, chants echoing through the studio. "Let him go! Let him go!" Timothée didn't move. He didn't have to. The people had spoken. And then his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You just made some very powerful enemies." A chill ran down his spine. This wasn't just about SNL anymore. He had crossed a line. He looked around at the chaos, the roaring crowd, the flashing screens. This moment would live forever. But at what cost? The doors burst open. More security, more suits. The network had called in the big guns. Timothée turned back to the audience one last time, raised his fist, and gave them one final message. "You know the truth now. Don't let them erase it." The moment was cinematic, powerful, unforgettable. And then, they dragged him off stage. The internet went into a frenzy. News outlets scrambled. The headlines were already being written. Timothée Chalamet censored on live TV what they don't want you to see. SNL in crisis. The night, everything fell apart. Chalamet versus Hollywood. A war begins. By morning, millions would be talking about it. But the real question was, what happened to Timothée next? And more importantly, who was behind it all? And that's where the story leaves us, at the edge of something huge. What do you think really happened? Was Timothée reckless, brave, or did he just become a target for something much bigger? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more crazy stories that Hollywood doesn't want you to hear. Because sometimes, the truth is stranger than fiction.